Welcome to another collection of horrible fates. This particular episode will feature 10 stories. All of these stories have been covered in other videos on the channel. My reason for putting these collections together is that some people prefer the long-form format of stories. It tends to draw a lot of new people to the channel, so before we get started, I just wanted to make sure you are all aware of what this collection of stories is all about. If you enjoy the content, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's the biggest thing you can do to help support me and my YouTube endeavors. Thank you all so much. Welcome back to The Cellar. This story takes place in Oconee County. Oconee County is the westernmost county in the state of South Carolina. With a population of around 79,000 residents, the county is broken up into multiple communities. Seneca, Walhalla, Westminster, Salem, West Union, Fairplay, Thomasee, Long Creek, Newry, and Utica. The town of Salem, South Carolina, is a relatively small one, with a population that hovers at around 135 residents. It was Sunday, November 26, 2023, and 83-year-old Dorothy Louise Downey was at her daughter's house in the quaint town of Salem, South Carolina. Her daughter was in the process of moving to a new residence, and Dorothy was there to provide her daughter with all the support that she could give. This particular house that Dorothy's daughter was moving out of was an old one that had been built back in 1920. What no one realized leading up to this day was the fact that the house had secrets that were about to come to light. From all reports, Dorothy's daughter had lived in this house for some time and had never had any issues. So the mother and daughter continued their work, packing up items and moving stuff out of the house. That brings us to around 2 p.m. in the afternoon. Dorothy would walk through the house and into the kitchen. As she did, a sudden snapping noise would be heard. In an instant, the house would seemingly swallow Dorothy whole. Dorothy's daughter would frantically start calling out to her mother. She peered down through the hole that was now located in her kitchen floor, but she could not find her. She would proceed to head outside, where she would enter the crawl space under the house. But as minutes continued to tick by, Dorothy was nowhere to be found. Eventually 911 was called and emergency services would arrive. It would take the fire department 4 hours to locate Dorothy. By the time they did, they found that she had already succumbed to her injuries. So what happened? Well, it turns out this old house had a secret hidden underneath. From all reports, the family was aware at the time that the kitchen floor had some issues with rotting, but never in a million years did they know something else was hiding just beyond the rotting floorboards. For Dorothy, she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. As she stepped on the floor, it finally gave way. Dorothy would fall through the kitchen floor and would continue falling another 48 feet into a hidden well shaft below. This well shaft had been concealed by the house most likely 100 years earlier, where it remained hidden all the way up until Dorothy's fateful step. Now, this second story doesn't have a ton of information, and there are differing reports as to whether or not those involved did in fact survive. But I decided I wanted to touch on the story either way. So this story takes place in Andover Township. Andover Township is located in Sussex County in the state of New Jersey. The town has a population of around 6,000 residents. Two of those residents, Paul Stiller and his wife, were really bored one night. So bored that they decided to do some driving at around 2 a.m. in the morning. But driving around wasn't deemed exciting enough in its own right. So Paul thought, "Hey, I have a great idea. Why don't we take this quarter stick of dynamite I have and we'll throw it out the car window?" Paul and his wife would proceed to hop in their car and start their now exciting adventure. At some point in the drive, Paul made the decision that it was finally time to light that quarter stick of dynamite. The lighter would click a few times before the wick would finally be lit. As it started to spark and burn, it's unclear who was actively holding the dynamite at that time. But whether it was Paul or his wife, it doesn't ultimately matter. The couple turned to throw that dynamite out the window, but a critical error had been made. The windows in the car were still all up. The stick of dynamite would bounce right off the window and go careening back into the car between the married couple. Based on reporting, it's unclear what exactly transpired next, but from what I gathered, the dynamite would bounce around in the car and go off between the couple. Both Paul and his wife would suffer numerous injuries, and I did find in some of the reporting that Paul would succumb to these injuries, while in other reports I found that the couple both narrowly survived this ordeal. Either way, I think this couple has rightfully earned themselves the honorary Darwin Award. As has so famously been said, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. Now, this next story takes place back in 2007. For those of you that remember, back in 2007, the new Wii game system was all the rage. Every family was looking to get their hands on one, and they were almost impossible to come by. This leads us to January 12th, 2007. KDNDS's morning show, The Morning Rave, was holding a contest, and the winner could win, you guessed it, a brand new Nintendo Wii game system. The contest was titled the Hold Your Wii for a Wii, which sounds exactly like the title states. Contestants would be forced to not relieve themselves for as long as they could. The one who holds out the longest would win the ultimate prize of the Nintendo Wii.
Hey, we're giving out the Nintendo Wii tomorrow morning. Are you ready?
Absolutely. It's for my wife.
Are you a good holder?
I think so.
We're going to start it at 6:20, and then every 10 minutes, you guys are going to drink, I think it's 8 ounces of water. Yep.
From all reports, 17 contestants were brought into the studio to participate in the competition. The contest started at 6:45 a.m. Each contestant was given 250 milliliters or 8-ounce bottles of water. They would need to proceed to drink another 8 ounces every 15 minutes moving forward. As the contest continued on, the amount of water given to the contestants was increased, with many talking on air about the physical discomfort they were now dealing with.
Oh my gosh, look at her belly! Are you pregnant? Come on over, Jennifer. You okay? You want to lay down? What do you? She can't even walk. You gonna pass out right now? It's too much water.
Jennifer, I heard that you're not doing too well.
My head hurts. They keep telling me that it's the water, that it'll tell my head to hurt and then it'll make me puke, but...
Who told you that, the intern?
Yeah.
That's one of those over there?
It hurts, but it makes you feel lightheaded.
Time would continue on, and contestants would start to bow out, one by one. What's alarming, though, is a call that was placed to the radio station during the contest. As a nurse called in to inform the DJs that the contest could be dangerous and potentially fatal. The DJs, showing little remorse or worry for what was transpiring, would respond to the nurse by saying that they were fully aware of the risks, but they weren't worried because the contestants had all signed releases and they wouldn't be able to sue them afterwards.
Eva?
Yes.
What do you want to say?
I want to say that that those people that are drinking all that water can get sick and possibly die from water intoxication.
Yeah, we're aware of that.
They sign releases, so we're not responsible. It's okay.
And if they get to the point where they have to throw up, then they're going to throw up and they're out of the contest before they die. So that's good, right?
Oh, that's neat. I suppose so.
Yeah. All right. How come you guys didn't do it?
Looking out, though.
We don't want to die.
Oh, okay. Let me ask Carter if anybody's dying.
We ain't dying.
Hey, Carter, is anybody dying in there?
We got a guy just about to die.
Oh, good. Make sure he signs that we laugh at that. Yeah.
Make sure he signs the release.
Get the insurance on that, please.
For contestant Jennifer Strange, well, she was determined to win that Wii. The 28-year-old mother of 3 knew how much her kids wanted this video game system, so as the contest continued on, no matter how much discomfort Jennifer was in, she kept pushing through. After 2 hours into the contest, Jennifer was visibly not doing well. Her stomach was extremely bloated, and her body was screaming for some form of release from all the water that she had consumed. Jennifer was in a bad way. Her speech was slurred, and her happy-go-lucky demeanor that she had started with had all but faded away. After pushing for as long as she could, Jennifer would end up placing second in the competition, losing out on the Nintendo Wii, but snagging a pair of tickets to a Justin Timberlake concert instead. Jennifer would soon leave the radio station at around 9 a.m. Feeling absolutely miserable but still pushing through, Jennifer would call out from work the rest of the day and make her way home to lie down. Her co-workers, fearing for her well-being, would place a call to Jennifer's mom to go check on her. A few hours later, Jennifer's mother would discover her daughter's lifeless body lying in a bathtub.
As a contestant on 107.9 The End, Strange drank 2 gallons of water in just 3 hours, hoping to win a Nintendo game system. Strange was runner-up, but only hours after going home, the Sacramento County coroner says she died the apparent victim of water intoxication.
An autopsy would later confirm what was already believed to be the culprit: water intoxication, a condition that occurs from drinking too much water, which then upsets the balance of electrolytes. Drinking too much water can decrease the sodium in the blood to dangerously low levels. This can then lead to all sorts of mild to life-threatening problems. Confusion, nausea, vomiting are all symptoms, while severe cases can cause seizures, coma, and even death. Jennifer was believed to have drank over 2 gallons of water during the 2-hour competition, a fatal amount her body simply couldn't handle. Following Jennifer's death, the radio station would fire the DJs of the morning show, while Jennifer's husband would file and ultimately win a $16.5 million lawsuit settlement. But no matter how much money was paid out, a loving mother of 3 was lost, and there's no way to fix that or bring her back. It was Christmas time in Cwedpoth, Wrexham. Cwedpoth is a village and community located in the Wrexham County Borough of Wales. According to a 2011 census report, the area has a population of roughly 5,700 residents. Louise and Robert Hughes lived in Cwedpoth with their 4 children. It was Christmas 2008, and the day was going as well as any family can expect. The kids woke early, opened their presents, and were enjoying their new gifts. As the day wore on, the youngest child, 4-year-old Emily Hughes, decided she wanted to play her Nintendo DS. Emily and her siblings shared the device, and so when it was her turn to play, she would always find a quiet place to enjoy her time with the gaming system. While Emily was busy playing with her Nintendo DS, her father, Robert, was busy installing the family's brand new television. This new TV was quite the upgrade from the old, bulky TV they had been using up to that point. Once the installation of the TV was complete, Robert began the efforts of moving the old, large, and bulky TV downstairs into the children's play area. Robert would struggle to make his way down the stairs. As he reached the very bottom, his foot would come into contact with something that caused him to lose his balance. That something was his 4-year-old daughter, Emily. She had decided to quietly lay on her stomach at the bottom of the stairs, actively losing herself within her Nintendo DS game. As Robert lost his balance, he came to a realization that he was going to not only drop the television, but that his daughter was on the ground right in front of him. He made a last-ditch effort to try and propel the TV away from his daughter, but his efforts would fall short. The old television would fall directly on top of Emily. As quickly as he could, Robert removed the TV from his youngest child. He would scoop Emily up and go running into the kitchen to get his wife's attention. She would immediately phone for emergency services as the couple began attempts at resuscitation. Paramedics would arrive at 6:20 p.m. and rush Emily to the hospital. There they found that Emily was in a dire situation. She was suffering from a lack of blood and oxygen flow within her brain. The doctors and surgeons would do everything in their power to save Emily, but at 10:10 p.m., she was pronounced dead. The TV had caused a fracture within her skull, and the lack of blood flow and oxygen was too much for her to come back from. My condolences go out to the Hughes family, and any family that has ever had to go through anything like this. No parent should ever have to bury a child, let alone be scarred for life by such a tragedy transpiring on Christmas. I have seen numerous stories similar to this one, and my hope as always with sharing stories like this one is to bring awareness to what can transpire with everyday things that we do. There have been numerous cases where I myself have moved a TV downstairs or upstairs, or even moved some sort of heavy object in the same manner. I know the next time I do anything of the sort, I will be extra attentive to where my children are all located prior to attempting such mundane a task. Now this next story takes place on Christmas Eve 2023 along the Mary River, which is located in Awanyila, a rural town and locality in the Fraser Coast region of Queensland, Australia. Now, there aren't a ton of details to this story as it actively transpired over the last 24 hours, but from what has been reported, a 14-year-old boy that has not been named was water tubing along the Mary River. Water tubing is a recreational activity where an individual rides on top of an inner tube, either on water, snow, or through the air. From all reports, things were going as normal as could be. It was 10:15 a.m. and a beautiful sunny day in Australia. The 14-year-old was having an absolute blast water tubing on the river. As the boy went for another attempt on the tube, the boat began to pull him along. At some point, he would lose his grip on the tube. He plunged into the water, not unlike many times before, only this time, he would not resurface. As I stated, there is not a ton of information, but based on what has been reported, I can infer that the boy may not have had a life jacket on, as not only did he go under the water, but he did not resurface immediately like someone with a life jacket would have. A frantic effort was soon underway to locate the boy, but before long, emergency services would soon have to be called in. It would take around 8 hours before the teenager was finally located. Numerous police divers entered the water in the area around where the boy had last been seen. Finally, at around 6 p.m. that evening, police divers would locate and recover the teenager. As of now, autopsy results are still pending, but it's presumed that the cause of death was drowning, and police don't expect any foul play in this case. My condolences go out to the family during this time. As I already stated, there's nothing worse than losing a child, let alone losing one the day before Christmas. So please, wear a life vest. Even the best of swimmers can have the smallest of things go wrong, and it can quickly turn to tragedy. Ded Moroz, or Morozko, is a legendary figure similar to St. Nicholas, Father Christmas, and Santa Claus, who has his roots in Slavic mythology. The tradition of Ded Moroz is mostly spread in East Slavic countries and is an important part of Russian culture. This next story takes place in Chelyabinsk. Chelyabinsk is a city in west-central Russia, close to the Ural Mountains. It is the 7th largest city in Russia, with a population of over 1.1 million people. It was December 22nd, 2023, and numerous onlookers had gathered in the city of Chelyabinsk, Russia, to see a stunt that was going to be performed by a man dressed as Grandfather Frost. The idea of the entire event was for Grandfather Frost to scale down the building using ropes, where he would reach the bottom and greet a bunch of youngsters who were there, eagerly awaiting to see him. As things began, all seemed as it should. The man, dressed in full attire, was reported as being an experienced professional when it came to climbing. As onlookers watched on, the man would suddenly lose his bearing and plummet some 240 feet to the ground below. Some onlookers were stunned at the turn of events, while others thought it was part of the overall stunt. Some even believed that a dummy was used for the fall and that the man would soon appear in front of the waiting children. But that was sadly not the case. Now, it's not completely clear as to what exactly happened, but the man fell 240 feet where he landed on top of a snow-covered structure that was roughly 1 story off the ground. It is believed that some sort of miscommunication occurred with the man's safety ropes prior to his descent, but an investigation is still ongoing. To make matters worse, the man's wife and children had a front row seat and were in the structure's yard where he plummeted to his death. Following the incident, festivities would continue on, with many onlookers having no idea that a tragedy had just transpired right before their very eyes, while some families immediately left in tears, completely shooken up by what had just been witnessed. Following everything, an investigation is underway, and it is believed Russian officials could cite for safety violations in the matter. No matter what is turned up within the investigation, a family lost a father, and for many kids, the joy of Grandfather Frost will never be the same again. My condolences go out to the man's family during this extremely trying time. It was March 1962 in an area just outside of Mexico City, Mexico. A 10-year-old boy who lived with his mother, father, grandmother, and 2-year-old sister would happen upon an item that was so small and so seemingly innocuous that not a single person who came into contact with this item ever considered how potentially dangerous it could truly be. Now, it's unclear from reports where this boy discovered this item, as some believe he simply found it stashed away within the house that the family had just recently moved into, something that was potentially left behind and simply forgotten by a previous owner. This item was a small, metallic capsule. From most reports, this capsule at one point had been stored within a case, but somehow it managed to end up in the backyard of the family's home. One day while playing in the yard, the 10-year-old boy would discover the capsule, and like all children his age, he found a fascination with the small, shiny object. Following some time messing around with the object, the boy would place the capsule in his pants pocket, where it would end up for what's believed to have been a few days. Following those few days with the capsule, the boy would lose interest, and the mother would end up discovering the object lying around the house. Not knowing what the item was, she simply took it and placed it in a cabinet within the kitchen, where it would sit amongst the family's dishware for the foreseeable future. As the month of April rolled around, the 10-year-old boy would begin to develop what could only be described as flu-like symptoms. He was tired, had a fever, and was constantly feeling nauseous. As more time went by, the symptoms would begin to worsen, with vomiting and diarrhea. The mother figured this had to be a flu-like bug of some kind, but the weirdest thing she discovered was a burn-like abrasion that had formed on the boy's thigh. This was in the same area where the boy's pants pocket would come to rest. As more days passed by, the mother would continue to urge her son to eat, drink, and rest, but the boy had zero appetite. As she continued to care for her son, the rest of the family would start to come down with the same symptoms to varying degrees of severity. On top of the entire family now seemingly being under the weather, the mother would open up the kitchen cabinet one day to find that all the glassware had blackened, almost like the glass had been burned. She found this to be extremely bizarre, but no one could figure out how this had come to be. Not a single person in the family thought twice about that little silver capsule that was still resting up in the kitchen cabinet. A couple more weeks would go by, and the 10-year-old boy would not get better. In fact, he was seemingly getting worse. This led to this family bringing him to the hospital, where they would administer antibiotics. The family felt confident that a round of antibiotics was all their son needed. But as days turned to weeks in the hospital, the boy was not improving. His fever would spike to 105 degrees. His breathing became ragged, and his diarrhea had turned bloody. The doctors were absolutely puzzled with the boy's condition, and had no answers as to what more they could do for him. Tragically, after a few agonizing weeks in the hospital, the boy would end up passing away on April 29th. This left the family not only devastated over the loss of their child, but the doctors and family members were left no closer to an answer that they so desperately needed, as every member of the family was sick. Their symptoms mimicking the same downward spiral that their son had just suffered. The mother was seemingly doing the worst, and as doctors continued to run tests, they simply could not find any answers. On July 19th, the mother, who at the time was 6 months pregnant, would also pass away, suffering the same horrible fate that her son had just endured. Then, on August 18th, the 2-year-old sister would pass on, and finally, the grandmother would succumb to the ordeal on October 15th. This left only one member of the family alive, the father. So what happened to this family? Well, as it turns out, that little innocuous capsule was the source of everything that would tragically plague this family. So what was in it? Inside that capsule was Cobalt-60. Cobalt-60 is a synthetic radioactive isotope of cobalt with a half-life of 5.2714 years. It is artificially produced in nuclear reactors. It is also used for industrial radiography, detecting flaws in metal parts and in density and fill height switches. This capsule was made with lead in order to protect against radiation exposure, but the capsule was not sufficient enough on its own, which is why the capsule was initially stored within a case that was also lined with lead in order to ensure exposure did not occur. Further details on how the boy came into possession with the item are not clear in any of the reporting, but he would ultimately carry the item in his pocket for days. Furthermore, the item was stored within the house for months. This led to the 10-year-old boy being exposed to more radiation than the rest of the family. It is ultimately believed that the only reason the father survived in the end was because he wasn't home day in and day out. He would go to work for at least 5 days a week, while the mother, grandmother, and 2-year-old girl were all within the home far more consistently. The moment the boy came into contact with the capsule, the entire family's fate became set in stone. As a father myself, I can't imagine outliving my entire family through such an ordeal. Outliving a child is something that no parent wants to do, but to watch helplessly as every member of your family succumbs to the same terrible ending, that has got to be, unequivocally, the worst fate I have ever covered on the channel. Mikala Jones was a 44-year-old surfer who grew up in Hawaii. His father was a professional dentist who had a passion for surfing and surf photography. This passion was something that he passed on to all of his kids. Mikala would grow up with surfing in his blood. As he grew older, Mikala would flirt with surfing competitively. In his 20s, he would be introduced to the amazing surfing within the country of Indonesia. This led him to start splitting most of his time between hitting waves in Hawaii and Bali. Bali is a province of Indonesia and is the westernmost of the Lesser Sunda Islands. It's said that Mikala had a good eye for photography, something that his dad had a passion and love for as well. It wasn't long before Mikala would strap on a GoPro, and the beautiful images he would bring to the world were like no other. Photography is hard enough, let alone attempting to do so within the medium of surfing. But many would say that Mikala had a natural eye within the realm. Through my research, I found a line in an article that I feel really sums up who Mikala, the surfer, was in all of his glory. This article comes from surfline.com. I will link in the description box below. It states, "He continued to push the limits of expert tube riding in dangerous waves and helped reimagine how it could be photographed. Between his countless cover shots and video parts and his mesmerizing GoPro footage, Mikala was easily one of the 21st century's most photogenic surfers." That ultimately brings us to July 9th, 2023. McCullough, along with his wife and 3 children, were staying at the time at the Awera Resort, which is located in North Sapura. North Sapura is a district of Mentawai Islands Regency in Indonesia. It is located on the northern portion of the Sapura Island. Just like many days before, McCullough would head out to the beach early. The familiar feeling of the sand between his toes and the refreshing ocean breeze blowing through his hair. With his board in hand, he would proceed to hit the waves. For McCullough, surfing, it came naturally, like breathing. As another normal day of surfing was seemingly unfolding before him, McCullough would suffer what can only be described as a freak accident. As he waded out into the water, he would sit and wait for the perfect wave. One would finally show itself at around 9:15 a.m. As he got the wave, McCullough attempted to pull into the tube, and he simply didn't make it. For those that don't surf, the tube is a term used by surfers to describe riding well inside the curve or barrel of a finely shaped breaking wave. When the wave closed out, McCullough would fall, and the fin of his board would cut around 4 inches deep into his leg. The cut was approximately 10 centimeters long. Management at the resort would immediately call for transport to get McCullough to the hospital. But tragically, when he would arrive, he would be pronounced dead. Sadly for McCullough, when the fin of his board cut into his leg, it cut straight through his femoral artery. The femoral artery is the major blood vessel supplying blood to your legs. It's located in your upper thigh, right near your groin. When the femoral artery is cut, the blood loss is devastating. To make matters worse, McCullough would lose a tremendous amount of blood before he was able to even exit the water. When water comes into contact with a cut or wound, it can cause the blood vessels to swell and dilate, leading to increased blood flow and far more bleeding. When this happens, water can disrupt the body's natural clotting process. From all reports, McCullough was a shining light within the surfing community. He ultimately died doing what he loved throughout his entire life. On the flip side of things, McCullough was also a loving husband and father. He tragically leaves behind a wife and kids, and my sincere condolences go out to his entire family. If you've never checked out McCullough's photographic work, I highly recommend you take the time to do so. He has some absolutely awe-inspiring stuff out there that everyone should take the time to enjoy. Now, if you ever come face to face with a large predator in the wild, the goal is obviously not to get eaten. But in a lot of these situations, we as human beings don't really get a say in the matter. No matter how far up the food chain we ultimately believe we are, when we do come toe-to-toe with the predator in the wild, the location we believe we sit on said food chain can change in a heartbeat. After learning a lot through my research on this story, I have to strongly encourage everyone listening to avoid hyenas like your life depends on it. Hyenas, you say? Why that specific animal? Well, I'm about to tell you, but before I do, I want to give a little extra warning that viewer discretion is advised. The size of a typical hyena can weigh anywhere between 90 to 170 pounds, and they measure anywhere from 37 to 59 inches in length, with their typical shoulder height being around 29 to 33 inches. The most dangerous hyena would be the spotted hyena. They are the largest and most aggressive type of hyena on the planet. Now, most hyenas in the wild will avoid humans, but the spotted hyena has been known to attack on occasion. They typically target smaller children or the elderly, but ultimately, hyenas are known to be aggressive, opportunistic hunters. Going toe-to-toe with one would not end well for 99% of us. What ultimately makes the hyena even more terrifying is the way that it hunts and kills its prey. They typically work in packs, and they can chase down their prey over long distances while keeping up a pace of around 37 miles per hour or 60 kilometers per hour. Their tenacity and sheer will and determination means they aren't going to give up the hunt once it has begun. They typically chase their prey to exhaustion while repeatedly biting and attacking in quick bursts. They typically target the animal they're after's hindquarters, causing repeated injury. Once the animal is injured enough and completely exhausted, they typically will collapse, not having any energy left to put up a fight. From there, the real horror of what's about to happen sets in. Once the animal is down for the count, the pack will break off the hunt. They will then swarm the victim and begin to attack and devour areas like the belly, targeting the soft internal organs. To put it plainly, they consume you while you're still alive. I don't know about any of you, but I can't think of a more terrifying way to watch my life cease to be. Now, after sharing all that information, we're going to head to a story that takes place in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is a landlocked country located in southern Africa. It is most well known for its pronounced landscapes and diverse wildlife. It was November of 2020. In this region of Africa, November is one of the many drier months. In drier months, normal food and water is scarce for many of the animals that inhabit the region. This coincides with many of these animals traveling great distances in search of whatever kind of food source they can find. 87-year-old Tendai Masika lived in a small mud and wood hut in the rural region of Chiromanzu, which is located within central Zimbabwe. It was a Monday night, and Tendai had already called it a day and headed to bed. As he slept soundly, a pack of hyenas that were scouring the area would make their way into Tendai's hut. Tendai would wake up abruptly as the hungry predators made their move. Now, a man in his 20s, as fit as can be, would not stand a chance against such opportunistic predators. So for 87-year-old Tendai, the moment these animals committed to him being their prey, he stood very little chance. They would attack Tendai, biting at his legs and proceeding to drag him out of his hut. He would end up being dragged some 300 meters or 984 feet away from his home. When he was discovered the following day, the entire lower half of his body was gone. Bloody drag marks would tell the story, ultimately showing how little of a fight Tendai was able to put up against the pack of hyenas. In conclusion, I found a quote in an article by CNN from a man named Tinashe Farawo, the spokesman for the Zimbabwe Parks and Wildlife Management Authority. I will link the article in the description box below. This quote dives into why these animal attacks are taking place at an escalating rate. The quote states, "If we had enough resources, we would have translocated the animals from overpopulated areas to where there is less population. The problem is largely caused by overpopulation of animals. This has been compounded by the destruction of their habitats by climate change, while the COVID-19 pandemic has made matters even worse. In normal years, the wildlife authorities rely mainly on tourism for revenue, but tourism in 2020 is just as good as dead, which has left us without resources to fund our conservation efforts. As I stated prior, I strongly encourage you to avoid hyenas like your life depends on it. That's not to say that these animals, or any other predators in the wild, are bad. There really isn't good or bad within the animal kingdom. There's just hunt or be hunted. Survival of the fittest." It was 2013, and a young 21-year-old Canadian student named Elisa decided to travel across the US. This is something that she had wanted to do for some time, and in a lot of ways, this was Elisa's first time going out on her own, without her parents. Being 21, she wanted to see the world, and so on January 26th of 2013, she would board a flight from Vancouver, British Columbia, to the sunny state of California. She would first arrive in San Diego, where she would spend her first few days before taking a train to the City of Angels, Los Angeles, California. After arriving in Los Angeles, Elisa would check herself into the infamous Cecil Hotel. The Cecil Hotel is set in the heart of downtown LA. Some floors in the hotel cater to everyday travelers like Elisa herself, while other floors would cater to short and long-term guests, primarily those that lived in the notorious Skid Row area. The Cecil Hotel itself has had a long and shady reputation, being that it was the scene of numerous suicides, overdoses, as well as the home of the notorious serial killer, Richard Ramirez. Richard Ramirez, aka the Night Stalker, the Walk-In Killer, and the Valley Intruder, was an American serial killer and sex offender. His crime spree would run from 1984 to 1985 in California, where it's believed that he killed 13 people. He was eventually captured, convicted, and sentenced to death. But in 2013, before the death penalty could be carried out, Ramirez would die due to complications from B-cell lymphoma, a form of blood cancer. I plan to dive further into Richard Ramirez and his reign of terror on a future episode on the channel. So that brings us back to January 28th of 2013, when Elisa checked into the Cecil Hotel. She was originally staying in a hostel-style room with other guests. For those that don't know what a hostel is typically a low-cost and shared form of lodging. Guests typically rent a bed while sharing a lounge area and sometimes a kitchen with other roommates. It would not take long before Elisa's roommates started complaining to the hotel of odd behavior with Elisa. From reports, she was acting erratic and causing a constant disturbance amongst the guests that she was sharing the room with. The hotel would swiftly step in and give Elisa her own room. But this would only be the beginning of the erratic and bizarre behavior. January 31st, 2013. After staying at the Cecil Hotel for a handful of days, this was to be Elisa's final day. Her checkout was to be the subsequent morning. She proceeded to phone her parents like she had done every other day on this trip. She would then head out to visit a bookstore known as the Last Bookstore. After looking at the map, this bookstore was located about 0.3 miles from the hotel, a roughly 8-minute walk in total. After returning to the hotel, the real mystery would begin. At 2:30 p.m. that afternoon, Elisa is seen on camera leaving the elevator lift. Her actions from this point on are anything but normal. The footage I'm about to show you all is the last time 21-year-old Elisa Lam would ever be seen alive. As you can see in the footage, the elevators don't close for Elisa. Why were they not closing? That's always been open to a lot of heated debate. Some believe that spirits from the hotel's dark past had a hand in what was happening with her, while others believe someone else was outside the elevator, potentially messing with her. At the same time, Elisa was a young woman who was struggling with bipolar disorder. There's a belief from law enforcement that she had stopped taking her meds and may have been experiencing some sort of manic-like episode during this time. Whatever the answer may be, the footage of Elisa is harrowing to watch. After not hearing from their daughter for multiple days, Elisa's parents would report her missing with the Los Angeles Police Department. They would hop on a flight to LA for a press conference on February 6, 2013. The hotel would be searched extensively, from top to bottom, but no sign of Elisa was found. All her belongings were found to have been left behind in her room, while no hotel worker had remembered seeing Elisa leave the hotel. To even further add to the mystery, no cameras within the hotel would capture Elisa leaving the property. The footage of her in that elevator was all that was left. It was like Elisa had just vanished. But how does someone simply vanish without a trace? Over the following days, the LAPD would recover and then release the elevator footage for the public to view. This footage led to numerous theories and ideas amongst online sleuths. As more and more people were drawn into the case, the ideas surrounding Elisa's disappearance would get more and more bizarre. But ultimately, it wouldn't take too long before we finally got some answers. In the subsequent days after Elisa's disappearance, guests within the Cecil Hotel would begin complaining of low water pressure, along with an awful smell and discoloration in the hotel's water supply. Some reports came in that the water had turned brown, smelled horrible, and had unknown particles floating within it. The hotel would soon have to take action, and they proceeded to send Santiago Lopez, the hotel's maintenance worker, to go investigate the water tanks, which reside on the roof of the building. When Santiago made it to the roof, he discovered that one of the hatches was propped open on one of the water tanks. He would proceed to climb up to check inside. Upon glancing in, he made a horrifying discovery. There he found the decomposing body of Elisa Lam, floating naked and face down in the water. Elisa had finally been found. But what happened? How did a young, 21-year-old woman end up dead in a water tank on the rooftop of the Cecil Hotel? June 20th, 2013, the coroners would officially declare a finding of accidental drowning in the death of Elisa Lam. Even with this answer, there are still so many mysteries to speculate on. Did Elisa climb into the tank herself? Did someone coerce her or throw her in? At the end of the day, we just don't have any definitive answers to any of these questions. The police ruled her case accidental. Her toxicology report would come back, and it showed low amounts of her bipolar medication, leading the police to believe that a manic episode led to her climbing into the water tank. They believe she was not thinking clearly and that she found a way onto the roof and simply climbed in. After entering the tank, she would eventually come to a realization that the water level was not high enough for her to reach the hatch opening. At some point, her clothing would come off. It's believed that she may have taken it off so that it wouldn't weigh her down. Now, there are other theories. Perhaps someone put her in the tank, or potentially coerced her into the tank. I myself could see this as a possibility. I struggled to see her putting herself into the tank on her own. But could I see a man, potentially a man who had shown interest in her, talking her into going for a dip on the rooftop of the hotel? I don't believe it can ultimately be ruled out, but we just don't have anything else to go on with the case. What I do know at the end of the day is that no one should have to suffer such a horrible fate. Floating in a tank of water and coming to a realization that there's no way to get out. Just waiting there until your body gives in from pure exhaustion or hypothermia. I wouldn't wish such an end on anyone. As always, my condolences go out to Elisa Lam and her entire family. If you enjoyed learning about this story and want to dive more into the case of Elisa Lam, I highly recommend you check out the Netflix true crime documentary, The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel. Now, I would love to know what each and every one of you think, so please take the time to leave a comment below and share your thoughts on the story. If you're enjoying the content I make, please go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps the channel continue to grow. For those of you that are interested, I have a Cellar Dwellers membership tier for the channel. It's $2.99 a month and comes with some pretty cool perks, so if that interests you, then please go check it out. I also have that linked in the description box below. As always, I do all the research, writing, recording, and editing for the channel myself, so anything that you do to support the channel is greatly appreciated. Until next time, I will see you all again as we head back into the cellar.